This will be part 2 of chapter 3. I want to go back to 1944 for a minute. That's the year that I had to run for county commissioner for a second term. Prior to that, the legislation had passed a law with a referendum on it that county commissioners would no longer run districts but countywide. So that made it real hard on all the commissioners to have to run all over the county. So we didn't like it. The Board of County Commissioners voted to take it to court and see if we couldn't have that law overthrown. So we carried it all the way to the state Supreme Court. And their ruling was that the voice of the people is the law of the land, and the people had voted in that referendum for the commission to run countywide. So that puts us in a race that requires a lot of time, effort, and a lot more money than it did to get elected the first time. But anyway, I qualified and got in the race, had 2 or 3 opponents, eliminated them all in the first primary except one. So I had a runoff. Come November, the general election, I give him a pretty good thrashing and sent him back home. So that gave me another 2 years. Now I'll move over to 1945 and the war ends. And a lot of things changes. A lot of things takes place. So I had the Grove coming along pretty good. I spent a lot of time and a lot of money, what little money I could get a hold of, trying to put that Grove in production. In the meantime, I had bought another 20 acres joining the 40 acres where the home and Grove was. That gave us 60 acres. And fruit brought a pretty good price along there in 45, 46. But by the next 2 years, 1947 and 48, it hit the bottom. By that time, I was producing a pretty good crop of fruit, some 6,000 or 8,000 boxes. Got 50 cents a box. And the grapefruit, they wouldn't pick them at all, at no price. That was less than it cost to produce them. So that put us down with practically no income out of the Grove, just what I could make working for somebody else. So I left the U.S. Sugar Company and went with Vaughn and Wright, automotive, parts, and equipment jobbers in West Palm Beach. They assigned me the territory from Clewiston to LaBelle and Fort Myers, Punta Gorda, Arcadia, and Fort Meade, Frostproof, and Avon Park. So I taken that job on a straight commission. knew almost nothing about the automotive parts and equipment business. But anyway, I had to learn. So I got on the road and would call on the garages and filling stations and take their orders, turn them into Vaughn and Wright and West Palm, and they would ship it out. That didn't work too bad, but it was real, kept me away from home nearly all the time. But you could make enough to live on. And I remember that equipment was real hard to come by after the war, such as power lifts for grease racks. And I had several orders if we could get them. So one month, Vaughn and Wright came up with 4. They got in the shipment of 4 power lifts. I got all 4 of them, had them shipped to my customers. I made $800 commission that month. Well, that hope out to fill up in a lot of select places. And I really was proud to have the good fortune of getting those 4 lifts from a big company like Vaughn and Wright. So I continued to work that and keep up the grove with the help of Ruby and the kids on the grove. A lot of times I was gone so much till they had to do some of it. And in 1947, Larry had gone to Fort Pierce and found a little old second-hand furniture store down in Niggertown that was for sale. And he went back. Mr. Badcock had told him that if he could find something down there, he might try to buy it for him. So he went back and told him, and Mr. Badcock bought it. That put Larry in the end of 1947 with a little old store in Fort Pierce. So he began to work on me to come over there and help him out. And of course I'd been there on the grove and been in politics. I just didn't want to break up and move, and so I resisted for quite a while. Anyway, he continued to keep in touch and keep insisting. And in the spring of '48, against my better judgment, I qualified to run for the clerk of the circuit court. Now that's an office that's also clerk for the Board of County Commissioners. So I was familiar with the office and with the man that had been there. And I thought I could do a good job, make a good clerk. However, that was after the war had ended, and there was a tremendous sentiment in the country to give all the political jobs to the veterans that is returning from the war, coming back home. And I was aware of that sentiment and how strong it was among the voters. But I had some people to try to encourage me that my background and the record that I had as county commissioner, that they thought that I could beat that sentiment. So I qualified and I went to work on that race. And just like I really expected, however, I tried to keep it from happening. In the May primary, a man by the name of Albert Moore a veteran that had come home, and he had a good family record behind him, and he'd come home out of the war, and the people overwhelmingly gave him the job. Incidentally, it wasn't but 2 or 3 years later before he was killed in an automobile wreck. So that was some disappointment there in 48. Oranges bringing nothing. I was still on the road with On and Right. And I'd lost the political race. So Larry prevailed and promised that if I would come and help him to build that store and build a debit, then he would help me to get a store in Melbourne. That was a territory that didn't have a store in it. Well, of course, that was in view of how the situation was at home. That was pretty good incentive. However, I didn't take it up immediately. I just rocked along, and finally one day along in, I think in December, it just suddenly dawned on me that that's probably the best thing for me to do. And he offered me $75 a week. So I decided to go. I went over there and left my home, left Ruby and the children at home, and drove back and two on weekends for about 3 or 4 months. He put me in Vero Beach to build in a debit. I didn't know a person and didn't know the name of a street. But anyway, I went in there and went to work. And I built a $40,000 debit during about 6 or 8 months of that year. So that began to get him pretty well set up to where I could begin to think about, well, what are we going to do about getting me a place in Melbourne? So I remember me and Larry taking a day or two and going up there and looking around for buildings and looking at the country. I found a building on US 1 in South Melbourne that belonged to Vaughn and Wright, the people that I'd spent 2 or 3 years on the road working for. They had an automotive parts and equipment store there, but they'd had some misfortunes and they had closed it up. And the building was sitting there for rent. But it wasn't a very big building, but nevertheless it probably was 30 feet across by 60 or 70 feet deep. And they wanted $100 a month. And I had enough of rent, enough of money to pay the rent for 1 month. Rented on a 12-month contract. I didn't have enough money to buy a license, to open the store. So Larry let me have $35 to buy the license. And he managed to get the furniture from Mr. Badcock for the store. So on December the 4th, 1949, on a Sunday morning, they sent 4 truckloads of furniture. Taking us most all day to unload it and just stack it in that little building. And the next morning, I was in the furniture business. Monday morning, December the 5th. Now, that will about conclude part 2 of chapter 3.